Hello and welcome once again to Big Blue. The construction will continue today. My intent is to take this piece of aluminum angle stock, which is 3 by 3, and I'll section it out into 3-inch lengths, and we'll begin building the attachment for the Y-axis ball screws and nuts. So I think we'll go ahead and make a few cuts. Again, you can do this quite easily with your miter saw, with your shop miter saw, with a good 80 or 100 tooth carbide tipped blade. Make sure it's carbide tipped. Take it easy. Don't crowd it real hard. It's not a piece of lumber where you really crank it into it. Slow and easy, and you'll be able to make these cuts without a problem. Similar to what I've done with all of my uprights. So I'll go ahead and make a few cuts on this, and I will return shortly, and we will take some measurements, drill some holes, and see if we can get some brackets made and our ball screws and nuts mounted for the Y-axis today. So be back in just 1 minute. Okay, so we have the first of the brackets made. Well, the first part of the bracket. And what I've done on this side over here, and I'll repeat the process on the other side, is basically I just have a piece of framing timber here. I have temporarily clamped the bearing block into basically a temporary position. And this is all going to move up and down, forward, back a little bit as I center off of my support plate. What I have is my first mounting bracket. And again, this was just fabricated from a piece of the 3-inch by 3-inch, 3-inch wide piece of aluminum, angle aluminum, and I'll just affix it right here to these two bolts, and I'll break those loose now. Now we are kind of on the dark side of the moon here, so to speak. You'll see some shadows. My lighting again is not perfect. It's pretty much directly overhead of the router, and I have my shop door open just a little bit. I try not to open it up too much, let all of the insects in, but it does let a little bit of light in, and along with the light comes a lot of the heat, and it's very, very warm today. So with that, it kind of limits the amount of time that I right at the moment that I'm working in the shop because of the heat. It's not a whole lot of fun to come to your shop and sit around, and it doesn't make any difference how slow or easy you move. You start perspiring, and it just becomes uncomfortable. You may have noticed that I placed three holes on the front side leg, and the reason for that is my intention is to take this second piece of aluminum, and I will transfer those holes to my first bracket. I'm going to call that bracket A, for lack of a better term at the moment. And what I'll do is I'll just transfer those holes, and then I will drill and tap them. Tapped bolts will kind of create this assembly here, and from there I will drill my mounting holes, transfer holes for the bolts to the bearing nut, to the screw nut, so to the ball screw nut. And it's that should be a fairly simple process. Got to do a little math. I mean, it's nothing complex. It's all straightforward. And again, the router design is driving how everything kind of comes together. It's just build it in place. You really don't need a big detailed sketch. If you some of these things I've sketched out just for my ease of kind of putting the thing together, so that I know about where I'm going to make my layout lines. But overall, you don't need a CAD drawing. So drawings on a napkin are good enough. Pencil drawings on a piece of paper, just fine. I like to do that because if I'm dealing with multiple numbers, increments, you know, as we did here, it's easier just to look at your little sketch and figure out the numbers versus trying to do the math in your head, which usually leads to a mistake, at least for me at least. So at any rate, so I have, this is how this is going to go together. I will transfer these holes. I'll tighten this up a little bit to keep it from wiggling around. Transfer these holes, bolt it into position, transfer these holes, and drill, put my bolts in there, and we'll be ready to set the the fixed end of the shaft bearing, of the ball screw bearing. And you'll see how I do that. Basically what I'm going to do is I'll just move this as far forward as I can, and this will give me the alignment for here. Transfer the holes, drill and tap. This first one is done, and we'll do the same thing on the back end. I'll run it all the way to the back, bring the bring the bearing mount, the floating bearing mount, up to where it belongs. This will pull it up into position, transfer the holes, bolt it in position, and one ball screw for the y-axis will be complete. So I'm going to transfer and do a little drilling on this part of the bracket, and I'll be back in a minute. The following images illustrate the assembled brackets for the the right-hand x-axis, left-hand x-axis, and the z-axis mounts. Again, these are all fabricated from the 3x3, 3-inch wide aluminum angle stock, simply drilled, tap, and made into an assembly. So it's pretty straightforward. Take your time. Let the machine tell you what it needs. Join me again next time where we'll fabricate the motor mounts for the X, Y, and Z axis. And thank you again for viewing.